I'm Angela Kirkian, Director of Education at PPA, and on this segment of In It Together, we get a chance to chat with John Wright. John is a documentary filmmaker, and we're going to talk a little bit about the similarities between photography and filmmaking, and just creativity in general. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, how are you?
I am excited to chat with you. I'm excited to chat with you.
Me too.
Let our audience know, John has done some segments for us for PPA EDU, and he is also the person who films a lot of our segments at Imaging USA. And
Right.
we've had a chance to work together on quite a few projects. And I just appreciate your sensitivity to your craft and what you bring to that, not just as a technician, but also as an artist and a visionary. And I think coming to that process with you and working in video, because that was not my forte, but
Right.
just working with you on the education side, what I loved about that was you were always getting my vision. You were always like, okay, yeah, I see what you're seeing. Yeah, let's go there. And so it was so much fun.
Right. Well, sometimes, you just get with, I'm sure that everyone has this experience they get with a client that just they vibe with, and you and I and, PPA, it's been a good thing for a long time. Yeah.
I love it. And you're such an amazing storyteller. And I think that's part of it too, because at the end of the day, that's really what we want to help people see, or other people's stories.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about just what's happening in your world right now. How are things? How is COVID life? Is that a thing?
It's weird. I spend a lot of time at this desk editing anyway. And so it turned out that I had a lot of editing to do around the time that COVID really hit. And so it kind of became a good time to be doing that. But, there were also worries because it's like shoots that I had lined up were starting to cancel, or people would say the word postpone for a while at the beginning. And it's like, I very quickly sort of figured out, oh, this is not a postponement. Like, this is just done, at least for this year, maybe,
Yeah.
And so and everyone can relate to that, I'm sure, on some level. So yeah, but it hasn't been bad. I'll say that. Like, it hasn't been completely dead or completely terrible for me as it has for some other people, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah. Well, you've had some projects that you've been working on, and I think you just had one come to fruition, right?
Oh, that's right. So yeah, just 3 weeks ago, I was working on a film, a feature-length documentary for Amazon Prime Video, and it was called Trail Code, and it's about sort of a new generation of off-road enthusiasts, people who love to get in these UTVs and side-by-sides and hit the desert or hit the mud or the sand dunes or whatever it might be. And that's not really a world I'm too familiar with. And so it was kind of like bringing me into that as an outside observer with a camera and a crew, full of cameras. We had, I think 6 to 8 cameras at once at different times. And so it just depend on the scene. But we did about a week of filming, and then there were 2 extra shoot days, and then it was months of editing, just like, post-production, on and on and on and on. And finally that went to Amazon a few weeks ago, and I guess I'm told it's doing really, really well. So I'm really happy.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. You can brag a little bit. You can talk about
about what I was telling you about. Yeah, no, I mean, I guess it's the #1 project of its kind on Amazon Prime Video. So I'm really happy so far. And I guess people, I get it through the channel. I don't talk to people at Amazon really. It's through other people. My executive producer and other people will tell me like, hey, listen to these numbers that I just got to, and they'll call me up all excited.
That's
and so
awesome.
I guess like something close to 500,000 households within like 3-4 weeks. So it's amazing.
That's fantastic. That's so great. What's it like? I feel like whenever I talk to you, you're working on all of these different projects, and you always have a different story to tell. And so it's almost like you're not specific to any one topic, but you always bring this beautiful your storytelling capability, and it's really your creativity that you bring to that. Do you have a favorite story to tell, or do you just like telling stories?
Uh, oh man. Well, I mean, I think it's about a fascination with people, you know? And so like, yeah, I think the more fascinated you are, the more curious you are about people, the more you're able to sort of go into their world and really explore it in a way that feels very authentic. You know what I mean? Like, I want to, I always want to get to the bottom of people. I always want to get to like, what are the motivations? And if you gave me a choice, like if you said, hey, John, you know, you've got like, you can tell a story from the outside, or you can really figure out what all those underlying like motivations and intentions and thoughts and like what animates people. That's what I'm really into. So like things on the inside, like I did this one film about a father who's a famous preacher. He was Bill Clinton's pastor, believe it or not, during his presidency, and his son was a also in the ministry. His son decided he at a certain point he couldn't believe in God anymore, and so it was this big sort of rift suddenly between them on the way they see the world. And I was just fascinated. I was just like, how does that work, you know? And I wanted to know, and I wanted to get in on the inside. And so I made a film about that, and it was really centered around these long form conversations between this father and son, who happened to be amazing. You know, they happened to be like just, I mean, just very dynamic, very compelling characters, you know, very expressive, you know, lots of facial expressions and close-ups of their faces and things like that. And so, you know, to me, that's where it's at. If I can get on the inside, you know, and really, what do these people, what are they all about? And I think in some ways, Angela, it might be a little bit like the process some photographers go through when they get with their clients and they sort of start to go like, um, you know, tell me about your life. What should we be photographing? You know, what is special about this relationship, or whatever it is. And so I sort of feel like it's similar to that maybe in some ways, but maybe just a different way of telling it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that analogy. I think you're right. As I've been a portrait artist for a long time, um, it is so much more interesting when there's a story behind it, right? When you're
Yeah.
not just
When you can figure out, you know, what is the, I keep coming back to this word, animating force. Like, what is it that propels these people into this relationship or situation, or why did they choose to have three kids, or why, you know, what is it about their life that they like so much and that they take the most joy in?
yeah, and really, I think the thing that you're very good at um, is building relationships and making things important that maybe
You
other
mean
people
like with the
might
client?
look over with a client. Hmm.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, um, I think so. I don't know how I could do it without that, you know?
yeah, but
It would be
there's a
hard.
sensitivity. I think there's a sensitivity that you have that's very inspiring that people can learn from because I
Well,
think.
it might come back to the same impulse, which is, you know, we're talking about like curiosity.
Mhm.
You know, if I'm curious in that same way about the client, you know, to me that can be kind of an asset too, because it's sort of like that same openness, like why do they want to do this project, or what is it about the situation they're in, or why they're hiring me, or why they want to work with me, that makes them want to do that.
You're such a great lifelong learner. You know, we've actually had that discussion on many levels in the past, which is also one of the reasons I wanted to interview you today and chat with you.
Well,
Like
that's your whole world, right?
it,
Is learning and helping people learn and all of that. Yeah.
I'm a little invested in learning. But I'm always curious, like what makes someone a lifelong learner? You know, like why are some people always wanting to see what the next thing is, or wanna get
Yeah.
into the intricacies of any one, you know, one thing? And so when I meet someone like you who can really share their heart and share their intention, um, it's just fun for me to get to dive into that a little bit. Can we
Yeah.
go back a step and just talk about
Sure.
how you got into filmmaking and start there?
Wow. Well, so I was always in media, you know, magazine, you know, I was the editor of my school magazine back in high school. And it was this big glossy, like 200-page thing once a year. And then these little newsletters. And so I got into media. I was into radio. My parents took me into a radio studio for my birthday present when I was like 11. I got to meet the guy I listened to every day on the radio. You know, and then I went into radio actually whenever I was an adult. That was my first full-time job. Was I spent years doing producing a daily radio show. And then, and we were, my wife and I were in wedding photography, and that was her thing, but I helped her with it in a way that a lot of people will be familiar with. I sort of ended up jumping into her world a little bit more. And so, you know, always been one form of media or another, but I just love the documentary form more than anything in the world. Like, it's just so powerful, I feel like, and there's just so much I can do with it. And so, yeah, I just really like it. And it sort of I guess there might have been some origins back, you know, I sort of feel like in the mid 2000s, and maybe I'm wrong, you'd know much more about this than me, but I sort of feel like in the mid 2000s, there was this moment where way more photographers, wedding photographers especially, got into photojournalism style photography and wanted to cover a wedding in that way. And so they were very inspired by the world of print and stuff like that. And you know, I'm sure that had an influence too, because I just was very into, you know, I watched a lot of documentaries and things like that.
Yeah.
I never thought, I knew a lot of people that thought documentary was boring, you know, that essentially, like, if they, you know, were going to say, they sort of imagined like an old school TV documentary or something like that. And I was really inspired by cinema, you know, just like big, where they took all the principles of cinema about like the aesthetics of cinema and lighting and all these things, and applied it to really a form of journalism, you know, where it's so to me, what I do is at the intersection of like journalism, you know, telling the truth about something or exposing a truth, and cinema, you know, and like the aesthetic, the art of it. And so like I just love being right in that little intersection.
I love
so that's
how you describe
how I
it.
ended up doing it. Yeah.
I love that. For those who, you know, photographers, I feel like some photographers have an interest in filmmaking or video, just even if it's just to dabble a little bit, or even if it's just to add a little bit into their own offerings for their clients. If someone were interested in something like that, how would you recommend they get started?
You know, it is funny because most of the photographers that I know have the tools really to do it. You know, continuous lighting is the one area they might need to invest if they don't, and also sound. I always joke that, and this is not a derogatory thing at all, it's just, but I always joke that I can tell when a photographer has given me a piece of video to work with, which happens sometimes. You know, I work with photographers sometimes on things where they've had to maybe shoot their own thing and then send it to me, and then I'll edit it for them and whatever. And I can always tell the same little things. Shutter speed, there's a rule in cinema about shutter speed. So shutter should always be about double the frame rate. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, that shutter should be at 48 frames per second, which photographers are used to doing shutters, you know, 800, 1,000, 2,000, whatever. And you can't do that in cinema. Well, you can, but it's not going to look right.
Right.
So there are little rules like that. But I think the sound is the biggest thing. People get wrong. You know, the sound is really hard to do right. And it's about half the experience. If you think about it, you know, you're both watching and listening, and everyone's so focused on the watching, they forget about the listening. Yeah. But I mean, photographers are naturally great at framing and aesthetics and backdrops and how to expose and all of those things that you need to be a good cinematographer. I think it's just, you know, that extra little step that pushes it into that, to being great over here, you know, as well. And so, yeah, soft lighting. I mean, I'm a huge fan of, you know, getting the light as big as possible. Yeah, so.
And I think there's a difference too, because I remember watching you work when we were first working together, and really there's a difference in seeing a frame and seeing an image, because that's how I think in images, and then thinking in moving pictures.
Oh yeah, where is it going?
Yeah, right. Right. That part.
Yeah, like if this person walks away, then oh, that's right, I need to move this. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and it's it's funny. I mean, but I mean, I think you could frame up a perfectly good still and then have that as a motion, you know, someone could literally walk and then you cut to the next shot. You know, I mean, a lot of, I think camera movement, you're right. That's another big area I didn't mention because I mean, stabilizing a camera is huge. And so you'll
Yeah.
often see really jittery footage as it's way harder to hold a camera still than people think, I guess, too, right? So that can be hard too, but wider focal length, you know, focal lengths and things like that. But I mean, you're getting me excited just talking about it because I just love the art form so much.
I love it. So what inspires you, you know, outside of your actual craft, right? Because I feel like, and I could be wrong, but sometimes when something is your job, right, and you get
Mm-hmm.
paid to do this thing, do you then spend your time outside of doing your job on doing something else that inspires you? Or do you do the same thing that you love doing for your job outside of doing your job?
Yeah,
That makes sense.
you know, you probably just stymied me with that one. I don't know the answer. Like I feel like on one level, I'm inspired by everything. And then on another level, I feel like I'm kind of not inspired by anything. You know, it's just like, you know, I'm just not, I'm going through my life so much, but yeah, I do. I notice things. I notice architecture a lot for whatever reason. I don't know why. Yeah, photographers talk about, you know, noticing lighting a lot. And I'm not sure that I'm great at that necessarily. I think I'm good at noticing lighting when I watch TV or movies. You know, like it almost ruins the movie now because I'm just so focused on what the cinematographer was doing to get that shot. So no, but as far as activities, no, I just love what I do a lot. And so I don't, you know, other than consuming the kind of art that I'm making, I don't think that I'm walking around, you know, super inspired all the time by everything. And I don't know what that's like. I mean, what do you think about, you know, in your sense, like as a photographer, do you, are you inspired by things that sort of then you turn into art or no?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, for me, like one of my favorite things is I love books. Okay, so my favorite book, one of my favorite books, is a book about Pablo Neruda, who's a poet, called Absence and Presence,
Okay.
and it's a book that includes his work, so it includes his poetry, and then it also includes all of these stories about him through the eyes of the people who knew him.
Oh, that's great.
And so maybe that's what I love. I love stories about people. I love
Okay. Okay.
intricacies, and so even the movies that I like tend to be those kind of tell me more. Like I want to know more.
Yeah.
You know, I love
Yeah.
historical fiction books as well because I like,
Right.
you know, the idea that we can know something deeper that actually happened. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah. Um, one obsession I have is the obsession with truth. You know, like how do you know how do you know what's the best way to tell the truth? You know, in cinema, for example, or in a photo. And I learned a lot from the filmmaker Errol Morris, who is a great documentarian, in my opinion, the best living documentary filmmaker we have. Uh, and when he came along, there was this idea about documentary, which meant that you had to use available light, no artificial light. You had to handhold the camera. You had to just observe, just be an observer, and then depict accurately what you saw. And he immediately sort of thought that's only one way of telling the truth. And so he did the opposite. You know, he was just a contrarian. So he put his camera on a tripod, he put artificial lights up, and he made people look at the camera and look at him and talk. And he thought that the truth was more of kind of an internal thing. So I don't know if this is helpful at all, but you know, when you're talking about like inspiration, I think I'm inspired by different ways of telling stories where you can sort of look at, you know, you could tell a story that's entirely fictional, uh, and yet it's exposing great truths that have to do with the world that you live in. And so I feel like with my style of filmmaking, or like whatever emerged as my style, very influenced by Errol Morris, by the way, but where you kind of I'll ask a question in an interview, and it'll be some answer that tells me something in this completely artificial setting with, 8 lights and, 3 cameras and a microphone. And in that setting, you'll reach something that you wouldn't if you were just watching someone in their life, And so I just think it's that kind of thing is really interesting to me. And I like to kind of explore where that goes in a way.
I love that. I like it. I like that as artists, we get the opportunity to do that exploration.
Right.
And
Well,
like,
and it's almost like if someone comes to a studio, instead of you might say, okay, here is a guy who here's a client who wants to come in for a portrait, right? And we want to tell the truth in this artistic way about him, in a way that's going to resonate with him, so we'll put it on the wall or do whatever you're going to want him to do with it, and hope that he really loves the product. Well, so you kind of go like, you could just show him in his natural environment, and so there might be a sort of feeling of like, if you take him out of his natural environment, you're telling less of the truth, but maybe something will come through in the studio that couldn't come through if you just showed him in his living room, And so I don't know. I sort of feel like there are multiple ways to get to the same ultimate goal, and it might not look the same at all.
I like this conversation so much because one of the questions I hear a lot of people say is in business, as entrepreneurs, as creative entrepreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that there's this belief out there that, well, that's already been done. I'm just doing what other people have already done, right? And so they're trying to figure out how to make their own personal mark on it. And I feel like that's one of those things that no one else can do what you do. No one else can have the conversation with the subject that you would have and bring out the way that you see that person. And right. And
Right.
so I love that idea that you're looking for truth, right? Because
Uh-huh.
that's
100%. Because yeah, you're right. It's going to be a unique thing. Someone else could shoot the same subject and get a different result entirely, just because. And also, I think there's subtleties that maybe only some people see. So, in that final print or whatever it ends up being, um, there may be subtleties that you see and the client sees that they have to sort of point out to other people. But I don't think it's bad to point things out about art. I don't
yeah.
think it's bad to pause. I sometimes will pause the film or whatever, and I'll go like, did you see what they just did? Did you see? And I'm excited about it. And they're like, no, I didn't see, John.
How does Melissa like when you do that? Does she is she always good?
Some people like my pausings and some people don't.
I see. I love that. I love just because I love dialogue.
Yeah.
I love hearing how people think about things because it's not just the surface, right? It's not just what we see. I like digging in a little
Right.
bit deeper. Um, I love what you just talked about too, that subtlety, right? And so there's something about learning the language. How do I want to say this? It's like every artist has to learn the language that is the way that they see. I don't know how to say that differently. Um, like when you're talking to a client or you're talking to someone about how you're going to do certain things, I feel like to make it honest, to make it true, to make it yours, whatever it is that you're creating, you have to know and feel confident enough in what you're asking and what you want to know and the story that you're telling and the way
That's
that you
true.
interpret in order to
Yeah.
elicit those things, right? So different
Well,
artists will elicit different emotions based on who they are as well as who the client is, right?
yeah, and it reminds me of that sort of conversation between the client and, I mean, sometimes I work with clients and sometimes I work for myself in
Mhm.
in some ways, because some films I'll end up making on my own that are not for anyone except me, and that final that final thing that might be in a film festival, or might be, this or that, or might end up somewhere, but it's not for them. It's a project of mine. But when you do have a client or someone that you're working with, I feel like there's always this interesting sort of dance that happens at the beginning where um, whose vision is the one that gets made, right?
Yeah.
So like when I'm working with you, I feel like you're coming to me going like, here's what I think we should do. What do you think? And it's a collaboration then from that point. It's kind of like, I've got some ideas, you have some, and it kind of moves in this direction between both of us. Sometimes people will give that entirely over to the creative and just say like, there you go, like here's the project, just do what we trust your judgment or whatever. And then it's just down to how many questions you might ask or not. Or it could be the exact opposite. They might have, a firm vision of exactly what they want, and they're going to tell. So I just think that that's an interesting question, as it applies to what you just said, as far as how that goes. What's the strength of your own vision for whatever project or whatever it is that you're working on, and to what extent can it mesh with whoever might hire you?
I like that, the strength of your own vision, because the other question we get a lot from people is how do I define my style? Like, how do I develop my style? What do I need to do that? And sometimes I just want to say, you have to photograph a lot. Like, you have to do things. You have to try lots of different things. You have to figure out what feels right.
That's true.
What makes your heart happy, and play. I feel like sometimes we forget to play. You play a lot. I feel like you play a lot.
Yeah, I do. I just invented something the other
You
day.
did.
Oh, it's like two weeks ago. I no, I took this. I took some of the little these like lens wands that go on the front of a lens that people can play with, that are they have like like little crystals and things like that people will shoot through.
Right.
And I took them and set them along a like a 5-foot thing. And then I have this camera slider that's motorized, so the camera can sort of slowly move. So it's slowly moving past these crystals and things like that. And I put a document, sort of like an imaginary or just test subject on the other end, as almost as though it was an interview, just to see how it looked. And I think, playing with things like that is kind of fun. It's like, maybe I can do something new or different, or do something that looks unique. I don't know. I'm still kind of feeling that one out. I'm not sure about it. I think it was pretty cool, but I don't know exactly the project that it would fit. That's the other thing is, you might have a technique you love that isn't good for everything, right?
I like that. I like that idea too, because it's just like, it's like building your toolbox,
Right. Exactly.
Right job.
I love that. Yeah. Building the toolbox. Yeah. And not being restricted to one kind or one thing all the time. Even though you might have a go-to, I also think it's kind of okay to have a go-to, because the other thing that I've noticed is a lot of people are especially good at one type of thing then they kind of become known for, or people want the most from them. And I think some people get mad about that. It's almost like like a rock band or something that people want to hear all their old hits and not their new album at all, even though they're most excited about their new album. Yeah. And I feel like you have to kind of be okay with your hits, because make peace with that, because I think you should be lucky that that you can think of yourself as having had something that was successful, something that people wanted, something that was good. And so I think maximizing on that, or finding that technique as the best. For example, it took me a while to sort of settle on a style of documentary film. There are actually lots of different ways to do that, and I just really like the way it ended up. And so now I sort of bring that at least the same sensibility. There will be different things that we're doing that we get excited about, but that core thing is now sort of set, that is like, this is what I want to be doing because I think it's what I'm good at.
Yeah, and what you like. I was just
and
talking
what you
to
like.
another photographer, and they were laughing, saying they looked at images from like 12 years ago, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, what was I thinking?"
Yeah, no, exactly, exactly.
But there's always an evolution, right? There's always an evolution in our craft.
No, I know. And I have never made peace with that. I don't like my old work. Like, I don't like my work from 10 years ago or 7 years ago. You know, like I look at it and I say, man, if only I had had, I won't say I won't like it, but I don't like it. But, you know, it's one of those things where I see this little, I made this little artist film at one point, a silversmith and writer in Idaho. And it was great. It was like a 10-minute, I think maybe even less than that, maybe like 8-minute little thing. And it was just this perfect little crystallization of their life, you know, in this one little film. And it was, I loved it at the time. And I look back and I go, that's a great film. I wish I had my camera that I use now. Or you know, like I wish I had all the good gear that I have now. It would have been so much better, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we just have to not be so hard on ourselves. Other people, I think, can appreciate my stuff way better than I can. I just see all the flaws in it every time I look at it.
I think photographers, I think we're a little bit like that too. You know,
Hmm.
it's hard sometimes to
And
see
yet
past
I would
that.
look at your work and just be like, oh my gosh, it's, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah, thankfully that's what, clients say.
Right.
They don't see it with the critical eyes that I think we as technicians sometimes,
Yeah.
you know, see our work.
Yeah. Or how
Um,
long, I mean, it sometimes as far, as long as some people have been around, they remember like the early digital cameras. Like I think we started doing professional photography on like a Rebel, you know? And I mean, you can't blow those up
it's
and put them
crazy.
on the wall.
Yeah.
Not easily.
Yeah. 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 We've had some clients from those early days, like come back and order stuff. And you're just like, yeah, okay. Hey, wow, that 1 meg file really can make an 8 by 10.
Are you sure you don't want to come back in?
What? Yeah,
Let's do this again.
it's kind of fun. I always love chatting with you, and one of the things I love about working with you is the vision that you bring, and I trust you. I think that's the other piece of this, and if I could offer, just support to any creative person out there who is working for other people, um, is once you build that trust, like it's just it's easy, like the conversation's easy. So building those relationships and building that trust, that's just really, really vital. I always trust your vision in every project that we do, because I know
Well,
that,
and that,
one, that you get
yeah.
me, and two, that you're creative. Like I love the way you see, and I love the way you tell stories. And so
Well,
um,
that's a perfect situation though, is where someone can be so assured of the other's competency, but also intentions and everything, and commitment to making it good, that they just can walk away and go like, this is great, it's in good hands. And I think that
yeah,
you know is something to strive for always with all of these things.
yeah. So last little piece of advice or thoughts on inspiration that you'll leave our creative audience with.
Man, we said
Kind
a
of,
lot,
kind
didn't
of an
we?
open. That's an open-ended question, isn't it?
It's an open-ended question. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think you said it's an evolution, and we were talking about curiosity. I think if that can lead you, there's a real key in that. I mean, I really think so. I think, you know, you and I have talked about curiosity a bunch, and I think it's just this sort of open-mindedness, open-heartedness, or whatever it is, that allows you not to go in with a preconceived like, I know what all this is, and you just kind of go in thinking, okay, let's just take some time and sort of figure out the best way to do this, because it might be completely different. You might use those exact same tools, those exact same techniques, the things that you've built up over your evolved, you know, career or whatever it is. But each new shoot or project or client or year, you know, is a new thing. And so, you know, yeah, just I really think there's a key that I'm always reminding myself of in being curious
I love that.
about people and about what they're about.
Yeah, you touched on something, and then we'll wrap this up. But you touched on something about taking your time, and
Uh-huh.
I love that because I do feel like sometimes when you're um, less experienced, you rush things a little bit. You rush conversations. You rush uh, uh, solutions to problems, and
Yes.
also rush your responses to people. And that as you gain experience, one of the things that I noticed is that I could slow down. I didn't feel like I had to respond so quickly. I didn't feel like I had to solve the problem
Yes.
immediately. And so I love that that's come up because I do think that that is just one of those things to really encourage people to take a minute. Like take a minute.
Mm-hmm.
If you're feeling anxious or feeling rushed about something, just know that you can take a beat. It's okay.
Right. Right.
You know.
Yeah. I think, you know, in the early days, you get intimidated
Mm-hmm.
very easily by either the scope of a thing or, I mean, and I still feel stress. I mean, you know, going into the project that I talked about at the beginning that's on Amazon Prime right now,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that was a huge managing a crew of, you know, 8, and having them all shooting the right thing at the right time, 18-hour days, the scope of something that was supposed to be an hour and 45 minutes of screen time at the end.
That's a long
And
time.
yeah, and being able to shoot the right things to fill that time, you know, so I'll still get, I don't think I'll get intimidated the same way, but I'll definitely feel the stress and the pressure
Yeah.
of that going in. And also the fact that, you know, sometimes people are spending a lot of money to do this thing that they're asking you to do for them. Um, and I feel the weight of that a lot. You know, I really do. Every single time, I feel the weight of the financial invest. You know, I sometimes feel like it's sort of like, you know, we're taking $60,000 and we're asking you to turn it into this thing, this minutes of
Right.
whatever,
Yeah.
and or whatever the budget is, you know, and I kind of go like, oh, you know, so I feel that at the beginning.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
but I think there's a difference between what you're talking about is like those early days you feel intimidated, so you rush
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like you're more flustered. And I think there's a way to learn to take time and be calm under the weight of that pressure, that the pressure could actually cause you to slow down, not speed up. Like you can actually sort
Yeah.
of just go like, okay, so I'm going to block out 3 hours to just sit and think this through and write down some things and talk to people, email people, and to have it come together in this thing. And I just, I mean, obviously, you know, not every project is 3 hour sitting down thinking worthy. It's, you know, you don't need that for everything. I'm just
Right.
saying,
Right.
yeah, that what you said is so true, I think, about, you know, just taking your time and like letting that pressure convert to creativity rather than to just, um, you know, stressy
Crazy.
flusterment. Yeah.
Clusterman. I like that. John,
Yeah.
thank you. You are always just
Thank you.
a bright light. I love it. I always love our conversations. You actually are a very
Likewise.
calming person
Oh,
to
that's good.
do.
At least I have that effect on someone.
I'll ask Melissa about that.
Yeah.
um, but I do appreciate you just taking the time to talk to us just about inspiration and creativity and
Of course, I
a
love it.
little bit about filmmaking, and hopefully you've inspired a few people to try it out.
Yes, and I love you guys. I love PPA, and you know, this year you're more important than ever before.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. I look forward to our next chat.
Thanks.